Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're getting into something, well, deeply human, I think. This constant sort of friction, maybe, between who we are deep down, or let's say a primal side.
Right, or instincts.
Exactly. And then everything society expects. The rules, the politeness, the being civilized.
That very word, civilized.
Yeah.
It implies a taming, doesn't it?
It does, and we all feel it, that pressure to fit the mold, to be good. So the big question for us today is, what actually happens when we try to bury those roots, those savage roots?
What's the cost of that burial?
Yeah, what's the cost? We're going to explore this, really lean into a certain perspective, looking at morality, repression, culture, power.
It's a lens that reveals quite a bit, often things we'd rather not see.
Absolutely. So get ready. This might feel a bit intense, like we're hashing this out somewhere late at night in, I don't know, Vienna. Let's get into it.
So civilization itself.
Yeah.
You could argue its core function is control.
Control of what? Like resources, territory?
Yes, but maybe more importantly, control of the inner world. Policing our own landscape, you might say.
Policing our inner landscape. Okay. So it's more than just obeying laws. It's about actively pushing things down.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Civilization is, in many ways, this contained instincts that, for most of human history, were crucial for survival.
But do those instincts just go away because we decide they're inconvenient or uncivilized?
That's the crucial point. No, they don't vanish.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets, well, interesting. And maybe a bit unsettling.
How so?
Suppression doesn't actually eliminate these primal drives. It just transforms them. It changes their shape.
Transforms them? Into what?
Think of it like damming a powerful river. The water doesn't disappear, right?
No, it builds up pressure, finds cracks.
Exactly. It gets channeled, maybe becomes more turbulent, and if it breaks through, it can be much more destructive than if it had just flowed naturally.
Okay.
Our suppressed instincts are like that river. They don't cease to exist. They look for other paths. They manifest in ways we don't always expect, sometimes quite destructively.
That's a powerful image. So where did these dams, these rules even come from? The moral codes telling us what's okay and what's not.
Well, think way back. Early humans, small groups. Survival depended entirely on cooperation.
Sure. Stick together or perish.
So behaviors that helped the group stick together, they got reinforced. They became customs, then maybe taboos.
Yeah.
Eventually, the complex moral systems we have now.
So morality isn't some like absolute truth handed down from on high.
From this perspective, no. It's a human invention, a pragmatic one, born out of sheer necessity. And if you look closely, every single moral rule, every thou shalt not,
Yeah.
it's basically saying no to a fundamental human desire. I mean, why have a rule against something if nobody wanted to do it in the first place?
Huh. Never thought of it quite like that. So even something like monogamy, is that also part of this control system?
Absolutely. Monogamy is a really clear example of society trying to regulate one of those powerful drives we have, the libido.
Right, the sex drive.
Well, yes, but in this Freudian view, libido is broader than just sex. It's this fundamental psychic energy. It fuels our desires, sure, but also our creativity, our ambition, even aggression. It's like the life force itself.
Okay, so it's this big, powerful energy source. And society, through things like monogamy, tries to put a lid on it. What happens then? Does the energy just fizzle out?
No, not at all. That energy has to go somewhere. Ideally, maybe it gets redirected, channeled into something productive.
Like what?
Think of an artist pouring intense passion into their work, or a scientist driven by this relentless curiosity. That sublimation, redirecting that raw energy into something socially acceptable, or they're blocked, or maybe just not enough. That pent-up energy can curdle. It can become anxiety neurosis, or can burst out in harmful ways. Addiction, violence, the pressure cooker effect, essentially.
Right, right. That makes sense. It's like trying to keep steam in a faulty pot.
What about aggression? Society works really hard to stamp that out, especially in kids.
It does. And evolutionarily, you can see why some aggression was useful. Defending territory, getting resources, establishing pecking orders.
Yeah, survival stuff.
But in a big, complex society, free-for-all aggression is obviously bad news. So we socialize it out of children. Teach sharing using words, not fists.
But again, like libido, does that aggressive drive just vanish because we're told no?
Where does it go? It transforms, it mutates. You see it channeled into sports, right? Highly structured, rule-bound aggression, it's allowed, even lionized there.
Competition.
You see in the business world, cutthroat competition, outperforming rivals. And then, tragically, when those outlets fail, or the pressure is too immense, it explodes. Raw violence, a reminder that those primal forces are still right there, under the surface.
You mentioned earlier this idea that our inner world kind of mirrors society's structures. Can you unpack that a bit more? Sure. Think about Freud's model of the psyche. Id, ego, superego.
Okay, the basics.
The id's just raw instinct. Desire, the pleasure principle, pure and simple. Wants what it wants, now.
Got it.
The ego is the negotiator. It deals with reality, tries to satisfy the id in ways that won't get you killed or locked up.
The practical one.
And the superego. That's the internalized rulebook, your conscience. But where does he get the rules?
From parents, teachers, culture.
Exactly. It's shaped primarily by the cultural values, the societal messages we absorb from day one. Society has laws, police, courts. The superego is like the internal version of that, setting standards, judging, often clashing directly with what the id wants.
So, my conscience, what tells me right from wrong, it's basically programmed by the society I grew up in.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
We're constantly told how to behave, what's okay, what's shameful. And these messages almost always put the group, the collective, ahead of individual gratification.
Which is necessary for society to function, I guess.
That's absolutely essential. But it creates this constant internal war zone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A tug of war between our basic urges and those internalized social rules.
Is that where shame fits in? That awful feeling.
Shame is perhaps civilization's most powerful enforcement tool. It's incredibly effective at teaching us that certain feelings, certain desires are not acceptable. They're bad. They make us bad.
So we hide them, even from ourselves.
We suppress them, bury them deep in the unconscious. But the key thing, as we've been saying, is that bury doesn't mean gone. It's still down there, pulling strings, influencing our thoughts, our choices, our anxieties, often without us even realizing it.
This idea of buried feelings popping up elsewhere makes me think about how we view outsiders, people who seem different. You mentioned colonialism, labeling other cultures savage.
Yes, the mechanism of projection is fascinating and, frankly, quite dark. When a society heavily represses certain human traits, maybe aggression or sensuality or emotional expression, those traits don't just vanish internally, they get pushed outward, projected onto other groups. Those others then become the convenient scapegoats, the ones who embody everything we are not, everything we have supposedly overcome.
So the colonizers, living under maybe very strict rules,
could project their own forbidden desires, their own repressed wildness onto the people they colonized. Calling them primitive or savage was a way to disown those same impulses within themselves. There's often a hidden envy there too, perhaps. Envy of a perceived freedom they themselves have sacrificed.
Wow, that's a heavy thought. That our attempts to be civilized could fuel prejudice and oppression. Does this fear of the savage inside and out connect to why sometimes people are drawn to authoritarian leaders?
I think there's a strong link. Authoritarianism promises order, control, a strong hand to keep chaos at bay.
And that chaos includes our own inner chaos.
Precisely. When a society feels uneasy, anxious about the wilderness within that it's trying so hard to suppress, that strong leader figure can seem appealing. They promise to enforce the rules, to protect us from the perceived threat, both external and internal.
But does that actually work? Does suppressing everything actually lead to order?
History suggests otherwise, doesn't it? Clamping down doesn't eliminate the pressure, it often just redirects it. Repression breeds resentment, rebellion. Even if it's underground for a while, it can lead to new, sometimes far worse, kinds of disorder.
It really feels like walking a tightrope. We need some restraint for society to work, obviously.
Of course.
Too much restraint, too much denial leads to these blow-ups, even in just daily life, right? That sudden urge to just chuck it all. Quit the job, leave town, break all the rules. Are those little moments echoes of that primal self?
I think they absolutely are. Those fleeting desires to ditch the routine, to act impulsively, they're whispers from that suppressed part of ourselves, reminders of what we've perhaps given up for the sake of stability, of progress.
So civilization demands predictability, responsibility.
It has to. But acknowledging those urges, even if we don't act on them, acknowledges the tension. It shows that the negotiation between our wildness and our civilized mask is ongoing. Those instincts are still alive and kicking.
So there's this constant sacrifice involved in belonging, in being part of the group.
Freud called it culture arbeit, the work of culture. It implies effort, sacrifice, giving up some individual desires, some instinctual gratification for the sake of social cohesion. Belonging comes at a price.
What is that price, fundamentally?
Freud saw human nature as fundamentally dualistic, pulled between two primary drives, eros and thanatos.
Eros, the life instinct, love, creation,
Exactly,
connection.
and thanatos.
Sure.
The death instinct, aggression, destruction, the drive towards dissolution, towards returning to an inorganic state. These two are in constant conflict, constant tension, and the work of civilization often involves suppressing one or both. But here's the catch. Suppressing one can sometimes strengthen the other in unexpected ways. For example, heavily suppressing eros, the life and connection drive.
Might give more room for thanatos, destruction.
It's a possibility worth considering. The energy has to go somewhere.
And what holds it all together? What enforces this culture or by internally?
Guilt. Guilt is the glue. It's the voice of the superego, internalized from society, constantly monitoring and judging.
So guilt is necessary.
From this viewpoint, yes. And when we transgress or even think about transgressing the social rules. But it's also a heavy burden, isn't it? Think about concepts like original sin in some traditions, a kind of inherited, inescapable guilt.
Yeah, that's a huge weight. But you mentioned sublimation earlier, redirecting those instincts into something positive.
Yes, sublimation is crucial. It's the psychic mechanism where we unconsciously channel the energy from unacceptable impulses, sexual desires, aggression into socially valued activities.
Like art, science.
Exactly. Think of Michelangelo's intense creativity,
Right.
Beethoven's powerful symphonies. You could argue that immense primal energy was being channeled there, but sublimation isn't always benign.
How so?
Think about nationalism, intense group loyalty, collective identity. It can channel aggressive impulses, right? Unite people against a common enemy.
Okay.
And that can be channeled into incredible artistic or scientific achievement, but it can also be channeled into, well, atrocities. Think of Nazi Germany, an extreme example of collective drives being sublimated towards horrific destruction.
That's chilling. So even the positive outlet isn't guaranteed to be harmless. What about modern life? Our consumer culture, it feels like it's all about desire.
But is it celebrating desire or exploiting it? Consumer culture seems to encourage indulgence, doesn't it? Buy this, want that.
Yeah, constantly.
But it actually thrives on perpetual dissatisfaction. You're never supposed to be truly content. There's always something newer, better. You need to improve yourself, your status, your possessions. It feeds a kind of restless yearning.
Which sounds a bit like the demands of the superego, always pushing for more, for better.
There's definitely a parallel, a relentless demand for striving, for achieving, that never quite allows for simple contentment. It keeps the cycle of desire and consumption going.
How much does this do to our mental health? All this pressure, this potential mismatch between our inner lives and external demands. We see so much anxiety, depression.
It's a huge question. Could some of our modern mental health struggles be symptoms of a society that doesn't provide enough meaningful outlets for these fundamental energies, where eros, the drive for connection and creation, is stifled?
We have more ways to connect than ever, virtually at least.
But does virtual connection satisfy that deep need? We see rising rates of loneliness, isolation. There's often a lack of genuine vulnerability, of deep embodied connection in purely virtual spaces. Perhaps that deep instinctual need for authentic belonging isn't being met.
It feels like power is wrapped up in all of this too. Who gets to make the rules about what's repressed?
Absolutely. Power and repression are deeply intertwined. Those in positions of authority, governments, religious institutions, cultural leaders, are the ones who typically define and enforce the rules of suppression.
And power is never neutral, is it?
Never. It reflects the interests, the biases, the fears of those who hold it. This inevitably creates hierarchies. Some groups have more power to define what's normal or acceptable, often at the expense of others whose desires or ways of being are deemed deviant or threatening.
Sexuality seems like a prime example of this throughout history.
Definitely. Controlling sexual behavior has always been a major focus of power structures. It's about controlling reproduction, family lines, social order. Think about who is allowed to marry whom, what forms of sexual expression are permitted or punished.
And repressing sexuality like that, it must create enormous psychological strain.
Immense strain, leading again to neurosis, hidden behaviors, or what society labels as deviance. It rarely just makes the desire disappear.
Like Victorian England, right. The stereotype is incredibly rigid public morality.
Exactly. A surface of extreme propriety, sexual repression, but underneath, a thriving underworld of prostitution, pornography, hidden affairs. The repressed desires found outlets, just not openly acknowledged ones. Massive hypocrisy, really.
How does this play out now with social media? It feels like a weird mix of total exposure and intense judgment.
It's a fascinating modern arena for these dynamics. On one hand, platforms for self-expression, finding communities. On the other, amplified shame, judgment, cancel culture. Virtue signaling becomes a performance.
Yeah, everyone policing everyone else's morality, sometimes very aggressively.
And often reducing incredibly complex human issues and behaviors into simplistic good-bad binaries. It's a new form of social control, in a way, enabled by technology. Judgment becomes instantaneous and global.
All this pressure to conform, to perform, to suppress, does it lead to a feeling of alienation, like we're not being our real selves?
I think that's a common consequence. A loss of authenticity, a feeling of disconnection from oneself, from others, from something deeper. You put on the mask, play the role society demands, but who are you underneath?
And how do people react to that alienation?
It manifests in different ways. Maybe quiet despair, existential angst, maybe rebellion acting out against the rules, or perhaps seeking alternative paths, spirituality, intense subcultures, anything that promises a more authentic connection.
So it sounds like civilization is basically a giant compromise.
That's a good way to put it. It's a constant negotiation. We trade some wildness, some passion, some absolute freedom for security, belonging, predictability.
But the trade is never final. The wildness is still there.
It's always there. The wilderness within persists. It's part of being human. We can try to pave it over, but the roots run deep.
Here's a thought then. Could it be that our very pursuit of perfect order, of total civilization, is actually the source of our deepest unrest?
The civilization paradox. That's a provocative idea, that every step forward in controlling nature, including our own nature, comes with a corresponding cost and repression. A new layer of tension.
So the problem isn't necessarily repression itself. Maybe some is unavoidable, but our refusal to even acknowledge it, to confront what we've buried.
That denial can be incredibly damaging. We convince ourselves we've transcended our primal drives, that we're purely rational, ethical beings.
While all around us, society shows evidence to the contrary. War, greed, exploitation.
Exactly. The denial creates a blindness. We failed to see the connection between the sanitized surface and the turbulent undercurrents.
What about things like outrage culture online? People getting incredibly angry about other people's behavior.
Well, from this perspective, could some of that intense outrage be projection? It becomes a way to discharge our own repressed aggression or desires onto a convenient target. It can feel righteous, but it can also feel incredibly destructive social dynamics, like modern-day witch hunts.
And authoritarian leaders can tap into that.
They absolutely exploit that collective anxiety born from repression. Find scapegoats, immigrants, minorities, political opponents, label them as the source of all problems, the embodiment of the savage threat. It redirects the internal tension outward.
So maybe, and this feels radical, maybe the biggest threat isn't our primal nature itself, but our refusal to accept it, our insistence on being only civilized.
Is civility, or at least the demand for perfect civility, the enemy? Freud argued that true happiness wasn't about eliminating suffering, but integrating it, finding meaning within the inevitable struggles. Perhaps the same applies to civilization. Maybe it's not about eliminating the wilderness within, but integrating it, finding healthier ways to acknowledge and express those powerful forces.
Instead of seeing civilization as this fortress wall keeping the wild out.
Maybe see it as more of a living ecosystem, something that needs diversity, including the diversity within our own human nature, to truly thrive. Suppressing huge parts of who we are ultimately impoverishes the collective psyche, doesn't it?
And guilt. We called it the glue earlier. Maybe it's not just a burden, but also a necessary signal.
It can be. Healthy guilt signals when we've harmed others, when we violated our own values or necessary social boundaries. It prompts repair. The problem is when guilt becomes excessive, neurotic, paralyzing, or used purely as a tool of oppression. It's about balance.
What about art? Stories, movies, music? Do they play a role in navigating this?
A crucial role, I think. Art is often where the unspeakable gets spoken, where repressed emotions, taboo desires, the darker aspects of humanity can be explored safely. It gives voice to the wilderness within, expands our empathy, helps us understand the complexities without necessarily acting them out destructively.
So we shouldn't aim for some kind of final victory over our instincts, some perfectly ordered state.
The illusion of certainty, perfect control, might be the most dangerous illusion of all. Life and civilization is perhaps less like a puzzle to be solved definitively and more like an ongoing mystery to be lived.
A journey, not a destination.
Exactly. Civilization isn't a finished product. It's a process.
Wow.
Always becoming, always negotiating that fundamental tension. And navigating that requires courage, yes, but also humility and a willingness to accept the shadows alongside the light.
That leaves us and you listening with some really challenging questions, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How much are you personally complicit in this repression, in yourself or in society? Do you project your own fears, your own denied desires onto others? Are you willing to face your own inner wilderness?
These aren't easy questions. There are no simple answers.
No, definitely not. But maybe asking them is the point. It's an invitation to understand ourselves and our world just a little more deeply.
Because ultimately, civilization is a mirror. It reflects back our own complexity, our own contradictions.
So look in that mirror. What do you see? Purely civilized, utterly savage, or more likely, something complex and fascinating in between.
And remember that wilderness within.
Yeah.
It's always there, waiting, not necessarily as a threat, but perhaps as a source of profound self-knowledge, if we dare to look.